When ambitious botanist Harper Lane reluctantly returns to her sleepy coastal hometown for the summer, she expects only awkward family dinners and endless small talk. But her plans unravel when she's forced to share her late grandmother's crumbling inn with her high school rival, charming marine biologist Alex Rivera. Their bickering soon gives way to undeniable chemistry as they team up to save the inn from a mysterious developer. Amidst sunlit beaches, midnight swims, and the rediscovery of old secrets, Harper and Alex must decide if they're willing to risk their hearts for a second chance. In a summer where the past and future collide, can two sworn enemies become something more? Harper Lane gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as her small, efficient rental car navigated the familiar, winding road into Port Blossom. The salty air, thick with the scent of brine and damp earth, hit her like a physical wall the moment she rolled down the window. It wasn't the bracing, invigorating sea breeze she loved on research trips to rocky coasts. This felt heavy, suffocatingly humid, and saturated with memories she'd spent a decade trying to outrun. She deparked just outside her childhood home, a modest Cape Cod nestled among towering oaks that dripped Spanish moss. The house itself hadn't changed. Neither, she suspected, had the expectations lurking within its walls. Unpacking was a swift, almost brutal affair. One small suitcase containing practical clothes and her laptop was all she allowed herself. This wasn't a homecoming. It was a temporary, mandatory detour dictated by death and legal obligations. Her grandmother, Alara, was gone, and the estate needed settling. Stepping across the threshold, Harper felt an immediate shift in atmosphere. The air inside was warm, scented with something floral and slightly stale. Her mother, Eleanor, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a tea towel patterned with embroidered lobsters. Eleanor's smile was hesitant, her eyes searching. "Harper! Oh, Harper, you're here." Eleanor rushed forward, enveloping her in a hug that felt both overly tight and oddly distant. "It's good to see you, dear, though." "Not under these circumstances." "It's good to be here, Mom," Harper lied smoothly, extricating herself from the embrace. "Sorry I couldn't get away sooner. The project." Yes, your work," Eleanor interrupted gently, her tone carrying the familiar, subtle undercurrent of mild disapproval. "Always so busy. Did you eat? I've made clam chowder." "I grabbed something on the way," Harper said, though she hadn't. The thought of food felt like too much effort. She sat on the edge of the sofa, resisting the urge to check her work emails. "Did the lawyer call again?" Eleanor settled into her armchair, the springs groaning in protest. "Not today, but Mr. Henderson said we'd need to go over everything soon." "It's a lot, Harper. Your grandmother left things rather complicated." "Complicated is her middle name," Harper muttered, then regretted it. It sounded callous. "I mean, she had a full life." "A lot of things." "Yes, she did." Eleanor sighed, her gaze drifting towards the window. "So, your work, how is? Botany, are you enjoying digging in the dirt?" Harper stiffened. "Mom, it's not digging in the dirt. I'm a research botanist specializing in coastal plant resilience. I work with cutting-edge technology, developing strategies for combating erosion and studying adaptive evolution in saline environments. It's important work." "Of course, dear." "Very important." Eleanor's tone was placating, dismissive. "But, are you happy? Have you thought about settling down, finding a nice local boy? Port Blossom isn't so bad, you know, there are opportunities here." Harper felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "Mom, my opportunities are elsewhere, in labs, on research vessels, presenting at conferences. Not here, not settling down, not yet, maybe not ever. My career is my focus right now." "Alara always hoped you'd come back," Eleanor said softly, shifting the subject. She loved this town, she loved the inn, the salty air inn. Harper hadn't thought about it much in years, not since she'd left Port Blossom in the rearview mirror. It was her grandmother's legacy, a grand, faded Victorian overlooking the harbor. A wave of unease washed over her. "How is the inn, anyway? Is it all right?" Eleanor pursed her lips. "Well, that's part of the complication. It needs a lot of work. Great asterisk deal of work." Harper felt a knot form in her stomach. She had a bad feeling about this. The conversation meandered through polite, superficial topics, the weather, distant relatives, Aliner's garden club, all of it underscoring the vast distance that had grown between their lives, their priorities. Harper felt like a specimen plucked from its controlled environment and placed in unsuitable soil, wilting under the unfamiliar light. She needed to get this sorted and get back to where she belonged. Later that afternoon, needing space to breathe and clear her head, Harper took the car. Instead of heading towards the highway, she found herself drifting towards the harbor, the heart of Port Blossom. The town felt exactly as she remembered it. Quaint, yes, with its clapboard shops and cobblestone streets, but also sleepy, a little rundown in places, relying heavily on the ebb and flow of seasonal tourists. The bait and tackle shop looked the same, the faded awning over the bookstore hadn't been replaced, even the same stray cat seemed to be sunning itself on the same bench. It felt like time had barely touched it, and that wasn't a comfort. It was a claustrophobic reality. She drove past the turnoff for Driftwood Beach, resisting the pull of old memories, both good and bad. Her destination was the salty air inn. As the road curved, offering the first glimpse of the imposing structure on the bluff overlooking the harbor, Harper gasped. It was worse than Aliner's vague description had suggested. Much worse. The paint was peeling in great, sad swaths from the Victorian facade, the once grand wraparound porch sagged precariously in places. Several windows were boarded up, others were grimy and opaque. The garden, which Alara had once tended with fierce pride, was a tangled, overgrown wilderness of weeds and unchecked growth, obscuring the path to the front door. The air here, too, carried a distinct scent, not just salt, but dust, decay, and neglect. It looked less like a charming, historic inn and more like a haunted ruin waiting to collapse into the sea. Harper felt a wave of shock and a pang of something akin to sorrow. How could Alara have let it get this bad? She drove away, the image seared into her mind. It wasn't just an old building. It was a symbol of a past she'd left behind, and now, a tangible representation of the complications her grandmother had left behind. Needing actual sustenance and a jolt of caffeine, Harper pulled into the small parking lot of the Tides and Times Cafe. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as she entered, the scent of roasting coffee and warm pastry immediately welcoming. The walls were, as always, covered in framed photographs of old Port Blossom, fishing boats, town picnics, storm surges. It was a place steeped in local history, a place where everyone knew everyone. She ordered a black coffee, strong and bitter, and stood by the counter, waiting, trying to blend in, to be invisible. It was impossible. In a town this size, a new face, or a face that hadn't been seen in a decade, stood out. Harper. Is that really you? The voice, warm and familiar despite the years, sent a jolt through her. She turned slowly, her heart doing an unwelcome flutter. Alex Rivera. He stood by a small table near the window, holding a mug, a comfortable smile on his face. He looked good, better than good. His dark hair was slightly longer than she remembered, framing a face that was maybe a little leaner, a little more mature, but just as effortlessly charming. He wore a faded t-shirt that hinted at strong shoulders and jeans that looked lived-in and comfortable. He fit here, in this cafe, in this town, like he'd never left. Alex, she managed, her voice a little rough. Yeah, it's me. His smile widened, though a flicker of something unreadable passed through his eyes. Harper Lane, didn't think I'd see you back in Port Blossom anytime soon. Last I heard, you were off saving the world, one rare plant at a time. The old competitive spark ignited instantly. Someone has to, she retorted, picking up her coffee. I assumed you were still counting barnacles or whatever it is marine biologists do. He chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. Something like that. Plenty of fascinating things happening right here in the ocean. Doesn't require flying halfway around the globe. Depends on your definition of fascinating, Harper said coolly, taking a sip of her coffee. It was good. Too good. Everything here felt too familiar, too comfortable for him, too unsettling for her. Still got that edge, I see, Alex said, his eyes sparkling. There was a history between them, a tangled mess of rivalry, academic competition, near misses, and undeniable, unspoken tension that had simmered throughout their high school years. Seeing him now, looking so settled and happy here, grated on her. Someone has to keep you on your toes, Rivera, she said, the corners of her mouth twitching despite herself. He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. So, what brings the illustrious botanist back to the sleepy shores of Port Blossom? Not here to study the unique resilience of harbor weeds, I presume? Family business, Harper said shortly, avoiding his gaze. My grandmother. His expression softened immediately. Elora, oh Harper, I was so sorry to hear. She was a wonderful woman. She was, Harper agreed, the brief moment of shared history cutting through their usual sparring. Well, Alex said, pushing off the counter. Welcome back, I guess, however temporary. Let me know if you need anything while you're in town. Though I assume you're only here long enough to pack up your grandmother's things and escape back to wherever it is you do your important work. Something like that, Harper repeated, feeling a strange mix of irritation and something else she couldn't quite name. She wanted to leave desperately, yet standing here talking to him felt unexpectedly charged. Anyway, good seeing you, Alex. You too, Harper. His smile lingered a moment too long. Try not to cause too much trouble while you're here. Wouldn't dream of it, she lied, turning and walking out, the jingle of the bell feeling like a sarcastic farewell. She felt unsettled, off balance. Seeing Alex had dredged up more than just old rivalry. It had stirred the embers of that old, unresolved tension, making her feel acutely aware of how much she hadn't changed in some ways, how easily she slipped back into that competitive, guarded version of herself around him. Back at her mother's house that evening, the quiet hum of the living room felt stifling. Elinor sat crocheting, the click of the needles the only sound besides the distant call of gulls. Harper was restless, pacing, needing to put the events of the day, the sight of the inn, the encounter with Alex, out of her mind. Mr. Henderson called, Elinor said, breaking the silence. He said he could come by this evening to go over the will, if you're up to it. Harper stopped pacing. Tonight. Yes, fine, let's get it done. Mr. Henderson arrived promptly, a portly man with kind eyes and a worn leather briefcase. He sat opposite them, spreading out papers on the coffee table. He spoke in hushed, professional tones about Alara's assets, her final wishes, the disposition of her personal effects. Harper listened detached, waiting for the part about the inn. And then, Mr. Henderson said, clearing his throat, there is the salty air inn. A truly magnificent property, though in need of considerable restoration, as you know. Yes, we saw it today, Harper said, a tremor in her voice she couldn't hide. It's quite dilapidated. Indeed, the lawyer agreed gravely. Your grandmother was particular about the inn's future. She wanted it to remain in the family, to be restored to its former glory. However, she also wanted to ensure the people she entrusted it to were committed, truly committed to the task. He paused, looking from Elinor to Harper. Elinor looked simply sad. Harper felt a growing sense of dread. Alara's will stipulates, Mr. Henderson continued, picking up a specific document, that the Salty Air Inn, including the property and all its contents, is to be inherited jointly. Jointly? Harper frowned. With who? Mr. Henderson looked directly at Harper. With Mr. Alex Rivera. Harper stared at him, stunned. Alex, of all people, Alex? But that's not all, the lawyer added, his tone regretful. There are conditions. For the inheritance to be finalized, both parties, you, Harper, and Mr. Rivera, must take up residence at the inn for the duration of the coming summer months. June, July, and August. You must jointly oversee and actively participate in the initial stages of restoration and planning for the inn's future. It's a condition of occupancy and joint stewardship. If either party fails to comply, or if the terms are not met by the end of August, the property, as per Alara's contingency clause, will be sold and the proceeds donated to a preservation trust. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Harper's mind reeled. Live at that crumbling inn for the entire summer with Alex Rivera, her high school nemesis, the man who embodied everything about this town she'd tried to escape. That's impossible, Harper whispered, finding her voice. I can't, I have my work, my research, I'm needed elsewhere. The will is quite explicit, I'm afraid, Harper, Mr. Henderson said gently. Your grandmother was very clear on this point. It seems she had strong feelings about this joint endeavor. Strong feelings? This wasn't strong feelings, this was lunacy. It was a cosmic joke designed specifically to torment her. Trapped in Port Blossom, in a crumbling, possibly dangerous building, with Alex Rivera for 3 solid months. But why Alex? Harper demanded, turning to her mother, who looked as shocked as she felt. Why him? We haven't spoken in years, not really. And we certainly don't co-manage things. Eleanor looked helplessly at the lawyer. I don't know, dear, your grandmother was private about her reasons. The heavy silence that followed the solicitor's pronouncement felt like a physical weight pressing down on Harper, a suffocating blanket woven from duty, disbelief, and simmering rage. 3 months. Co-managing the salty air-in with Alex Rivera. It wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a cosmic joke, a deliberate entanglement designed by a grandmother who apparently knew exactly how to hit her where it hurt. Harper wasn't just back in the place she'd fled. She was now shackled to the past, bound to the very person who represented everything she'd tried to escape. The grand, decaying inn loomed in her mind's eye, a dusty mausoleum filled with ghosts and unwelcome memories. Now, it was to be their prison, their shared quarters for the duration of a summer that suddenly felt impossibly long and thick with unspoken conflict. The journey back to Port Blossom had ended not with freedom, but with an anchor dropped, heavy and unexpected, rooting her to the wrong soil and promising nothing but turbulent days ahead in the salty, charged air of their involuntary new home. The morning after the solicitor's bombshell dawned humid and heavy, much like the oppressive weight settled in Harper's chest. There had been no sleep, only furious disbelief and the bitter taste of Alara's cruel twist of fate. Now, standing on the crumbling steps of the salty air inn with a single duffel bag, Harper watched Alex Rivera arrive, a mirror image of her own resentful return. He climbed out of his truck, his expression as guarded and wary as her own, and the stagnant air between them crackled with the promise of conflict. This decaying inn, their mandated shared quarters for the summer, was already proving fertile ground for salty words. Alex slammed the truck door shut, the sound echoing slightly in the quiet street. He wore a faded t-shirt that stretched comfortably across his shoulders and worn-in jeans, looking far too relaxed for someone whose life had just been similarly upended. He slung a canvas duffel bag over his shoulder, its casual heft a stark contrast to the careful, organized way Harper lived. Well, look at that, he said, his voice low but carrying easily in the still air. Together again, Harper? Harper bristled. Don't make it sound like a high school reunion, Rivera. This isn't exactly a social call. He took a step towards the porch, his gaze sweeping over the peeling paint and sagging gutters. Could have fooled me. Seems like we're practically roommates now. Forced cohabitants, she corrected sharply. There's a difference. And this isn't a dorm room, it's this. She gestured broadly at the dilapidated facade. A mess. A very expensive, time-consuming mess. Our mess, Alex countered, stepping past her towards the front door. Alara's parting gift, I guess, a summer-long forced bonding exercise. He reached for the ornate, tarnished doorknob. So, ladies first, or should I brave the certain structural instabilities? Oh, go ahead, act the hero, Harper muttered, following him onto the porch. The floorboards creaked ominously under their weight. Just try not to get crushed by falling debris before we figure out whose bright idea this was. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust, salt, and something vaguely mildewed. Sunlight struggled through grimy windows, casting weak, hazy beams on the furniture draped in yellowed sheets. The grand entrance hall, once impressive, was now a monument to neglect. Cobwebs hung like macabre decorations, and dust coated every surface. Charming, Harper said dryly, pulling out her phone to snap a quick clinical photo of a particularly large cobweb. Documentation, her scientist's brain kicking in. Yeah, puts the rustic in rustic, Alex replied, running a finger along a dusty banister. Think we can list this on Airbnb as authentically haunted and slowly disintegrating? Hilarious, she said, though a tiny corner of her mouth twitched. Let's get the logistics sorted. How are we dividing things up? I assume you have preferred methods for tackling inevitable vermin infestations. Ever the pragmatist, he said, turning to face her. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Look, Harper, I'm not thrilled about this either, but we're stuck. The will is pretty clear. June through August. Reside here. Actively participate in initial restoration. If we don't, it gets sold. Yes, the lawyer made that abundantly clear, she said, hugging her duffel bag tighter. So, rooms, there must be dozens. I'll take one on the top floor away from Everything. Alex leaned against the banister, arms crossed. Top floor might have leaky ceilings. You see the roof from outside? Needs work. I was thinking the second floor might be safer, less likely to fall through. And more likely to hear you breathing through the floorboards? No thanks, she said, shaking her head. Top floor is fine. I can handle a little water damage, or I'll just put a bucket under it. Practicality, remember? He sighed. Fine, you take the top floor. I'll take the second. That leaves. What? The first floor, attic, and basement for initial restoration? Where do we even start? Cleaning, obviously, Harper said, looking around at the thick dust. And assessing the structural issues. We need to figure out what needs professional help immediately versus what we can tackle ourselves. I brought gloves and masks. She patted her duffel bag. Of course you did, Alex said, a faint smile returning. Okay. You handle the assessment of structural liabilities and hygiene. I'll poke around the basement, see if anything down there looks salvageable or horrifying. Deal, Harper said, relief washing over her that they hadn't immediately devolved into a full-blown shouting match. Yet, just, don't touch anything without telling me, and let's set some basic ground rules. My space is my space. No wandering into rooms without knocking. We share the kitchen and common areas but clean up after ourselves. And no late-night sea shanties. Alex laughed softly. Wouldn't dream of it, Captain. Your rules are noted. He gestured upstairs. Shall we embark on the grand tour of decay? With their shaky truce established for the next 5 minutes, they began their grim reconnaissance. The salty air in was less a fixer-upper and more a historical disaster zone. They moved from room to room, their initial bickering giving way to a shared, stunned silence as the scale of the neglect became horrifyingly clear. Scene after scene unfolded like a macabre dollhouse reveal. A room with elegant, but torn, floral wallpaper had a large, discolored patch on the ceiling where water damage had clearly spread. Another had a window pane cracked and boarded up. Dust lay thick on every surface, undisturbed for years, perhaps decades. Sunlight, where it penetrated, illuminated millions of floating particles, making the air feel heavy and unhealthy. In one bedroom, a layer of grime coated a beautiful antique dresser, its wood dulled and scratched. In another, a musty scent clung to faded velvet armchairs, signs of lingering dampness. Peeling paint curled away from doorframes like old skin. They opened closet doors to find empty hangers and the faint smell of mothballs, ghosts of past guests. From the back windows overlooking the garden, they saw a tangled jungle of weeds, overgrown bushes, and a small, moss-covered stone fountain choked with leaves. The porch wrapping around the back was missing railings in places, and steps were splintered. Well, Alex said, his voice quiet as they stood in what must have been the main parlor, facing a boarded-up fireplace. It's worse than I thought. Harper didn't respond immediately. She was staring at a faint rectangle on the dusty wall where a painting must have hung. It wasn't just the dust and decay, it was the stillness, the sense of abandonment that was most unsettling. This wasn't just a building, it was a place with a history, a place Alara had loved. Seeing it like this, so neglected, felt like a betrayal. It's overwhelming, she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper. How could she let it get this bad? Alex ran a hand through his hair. Maybe she couldn't help it, Harper, or maybe she had her reasons. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. They were standing in the silence of the inn's decay, two rivals united only by a shared, impossible inheritance. We need a plan, Harper said, snapping back into her pragmatic mode, or at least a list, a very, very long list. Start with the roof, Alex said, pointing upwards. Definitely the roof, and those windows. We can't even see out of half of them. As they moved towards the kitchen, a sharp rap sounded on the front door. They exchanged surprised glances. Expecting company? Harper asked. Not unless the developer who wants to buy this place decided to introduce himself in person, Alex muttered, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Harper followed him back to the entrance hall. Through the dusty glass of the sidelight, she saw a small, wiry woman with kind eyes and a bright smile framed by silver hair. Alex opened the door. Mrs. Gable, it's Alex, Alex Rivera. Alex, my dear boy, look at you. The woman's smile widened. She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping around the hall, her smile fading slightly as she took in the state of the inn. Oh dear, it's worse than I'd heard. You heard right, Mrs. Gable, Alex said. This is quite a project. He turned to Harper. Harper, this is Mrs. Gable. She worked for Alara for years, kept the inn running back in its heyday. Mrs. Gable turned to Harper, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. Harper, my goodness, Alara talked about you often, so grown up. I'm so sorry about your grandmother, dear. She was a wonderful woman, a bit eccentric at times, perhaps, but with a heart of gold. Thank you, Mrs. Gable, Harper said, feeling a warmth she hadn't expected. This was the first person she'd met in Port Blossom who seemed genuinely connected to Alara in a personal way. I came by, Mrs. Gable explained, setting a small wicker basket on a dusty side table. Heard the news down at the Tides and Times. Couldn't believe it when they said Alara left the place to you too. But then, it makes a certain kind of sense, knowing Alara and knowing you too. She gave them a knowing look that made both Harper and Alex shift uncomfortably. Sense? Harper asked, unable to keep the skepticism out of her voice. This is insane. A research botanist and a marine biologist inheriting a crumbling inn and being forced to live in it. It makes *0* sense. Mrs. Gable chuckled, a dry, gentle sound. Ah, but Alara always did see things differently. She loved this old place, you know, loved it fiercely, even when it was falling apart around her. She always said it had good bones. Needed a little love, a little life brought back into it. She looked around again, her expression softening. We had some grand times here, summers full of laughter, guests from all over. Alara hosting readings in the parlor, tea on the porch, the garden blooming. Her voice trailed off, sadness touching her features. She didn't seem to be doing much to keep it up recently, Harper said, perhaps too bluntly. Mrs. Gable sighed. Alara, she wasn't as spry as she used to be. And the money? Running a place like this takes a lot, dear, more than you'd think. She had plans, though, always had plans. She smiled faintly. She talked about restoring the garden, opening up the terrace again, maybe even getting a proper chef. She even mentioned getting you involved, Harper. Something about your green thumb, she said. Harper felt a jolt. Alara had mentioned her green thumb. Harper's expertise was in plant genetics, not potting petunias. But the idea that Alara had considered her for the inn in some capacity was unexpected. And Alex, Mrs. Gable continued, turning to him, she knew you loved the ocean, the history of the town, said you had a good head on your shoulders, away with people. Alex looked genuinely surprised. She said that? She did, Mrs. Gable confirmed. She saw things in people. Potential, I suppose, and this inn, it was more than just a building to her. It was a piece of Port Blossom history. A community hub once, she didn't want to see it lost. Lost? Harper repeated. Mrs. Gable leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. There's been talk, whispers around town, about developers buying up properties along the coast, old places like this, tearing them down, putting up something modern, soulless. Alex nodded grimly. I've heard the same, down at the docks, some guy sniffing around, asking questions about Alara's property. Harper's annoyance began to morph into something else, a flicker of alarm. A developer, tearing down the salty air in? Who, did you get a name? No name I recognized, Alex said. Just whispers, but it makes sense, doesn't it? Alara's gone, the inn's neglected. It's ripe for the picking. But why leave it to us then? Harper asked, her mind racing. Why not just sell it herself if she was struggling, or leave it to one of us? Mrs. Gable looked between them, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps she knew, she said softly. Perhaps she knew selling it wasn't what she truly wanted. Maybe. She thought you two together were the only ones who could save it, or at least figure out what needed to be done. Sell it properly, perhaps, but with its history respected. Or, she paused, her eyes sparkling faintly, maybe even bring it back to life, like she always dreamed. The weight of her words settled on them. Harper looked at Alex, really looked at him, and saw not just her old rival, but someone else burdened by the same absurd situation. The sheer scale of the work, coupled with the potential threat of the developer, suddenly felt less like a personal inconvenience and more like a challenge they might actually have to face together. Mrs. Gable stayed a little longer, sharing more gentle memories of Alara and the inn, offering practical advice about leaky pipes and where Alara kept the old tools. She left the wicker basket, which contained fresh-baked muffins and a small, worn notebook. Alara's notes, she explained, might be helpful. Good luck, dears. Let me know if you need anything. Truly. After Mrs. Gable left, the silence of the inn returned, but it felt different now. Less oppressive, more expectant. Harper picked up the notebook. It was old, its pages filled with Alara's elegant, slightly spidery script, detailing everything from guest preferences to gardening notes and repair reminders. Notes, muffins, and cryptic hints, Harper said, turning a page in the notebook. Well, that was enlightening. Yeah, Alex agreed, kicking lightly at a loose floorboard. Seems like Alara dropped us into this mess for a reason. And it might not just be about getting us to talk to each other. Harper walked over to one of the windows facing the harbor, trying to rub away some of the grime with her sleeve to get a clearer view. The familiar sight of the fishing boats bobbing in the water, the salty air pressing against the glass, felt both foreign and strangely comforting. So, she said, turning back to him. A crumbling mansion, a deadline, and a mystery developer sniffing around. And us, Alex added, leaning against the doorway. Stuck together like barnacles on a hull. Harper almost smiled. Eloquent, Rivera, just what I'd expect from a marine biologist. She paused, the practical part of her brain taking over the resentment. Look, this is impossible. Objectively impossible for two people with zero experience running, let alone restoring an inn. Tell me something I don't know, he said. But, she continued, Mrs. Gable is right. Alara didn't do this randomly, and if there's a developer circling, maybe she was trying to buy time, give us a chance to, figure something out. Or maybe she was just being Alara, Alex said, but his tone lacked conviction. Either way, Harper pressed, her gaze steady. We can't do this separately. The will says we have to actively participate in * initial restoration. That means working together, whether we like it or not. Alex pushed off the doorframe and walked into the center of the hall. He looked up at the high, dusty ceiling, then around at the decaying grandeur. Okay, he said finally. Okay, you're right. We hate each other, fine, but we're stuck. And if we fail, some soulless corporation tears this place down. He looked at her, a flicker of something akin to respect in his eyes. I don't want that to happen. This place is part of Port Blossom, part of its history. Harper felt a grudging admission bubble up. She didn't know why she felt protective of this dusty, derelict building, but seeing it like this, hearing Mrs. Gable's stories, and thinking about Alara's potential intentions, it stirred something. Maybe it was the scientist in her, recognizing the potential for discovery, or maybe it was just a flicker of connection to her grandmother's legacy. Neither do I, she admitted quietly. All right, truce. A temporary, highly conditional truce. Temporary, highly conditional, Alex repeated, offering a small, genuine smile this time. Okay, Harper Lane, where do we start? Harper looked down at Alara's notebook, then back at the overwhelming space around them. The task ahead was monumental, their forced partnership fragile, and the threat from the outside very real. But for the first time since reading the will, she felt a tiny spark of something other than fury, a flicker of determination. They stood in the silent kitchen, the notebook open, the scent of stale air and forgotten tea lingering. The list, simple words on faded paper, seemed less like a roadmap and more like the first step into a labyrinth. Alara had left them this puzzle, this obligation, and now this shared space within the sleeping walls of the salty air. Neither was comfortable, neither was optimistic, but the alternative, losing everything, felt far worse than the awkward alliance forged in the heat of the moment. The challenges weren't just the peeling paint and dusty corners, they were the unknown contents of hidden rooms, the whispers of a legacy yet to be understood, and the ever-present shadow of sterling thorn. The morning would bring the first tentative steps of their reluctant partnership, a joint descent into the quiet decay. They would start with the list, maybe those ill-fated muffins, but the true test lay in what the inn was hiding, and how they would face the forces gathering to take it all. The morning arrived, just as promised, bringing with it the first practical steps of Harper and Alex's reluctant alliance within the salty air's decaying walls. Armed with dust masks and a grim determination, they began the monumental task of confronting the inn's stubborn neglect, room by dusty room. The silence that fell between them wasn't comfortable, but it was purposeful, a fragile, unspoken agreement to focus solely on the layers of disrepair that promised to yield not just cleaning challenges, but perhaps the inn's long-kept secrets. They started in the kitchen, a cavernous room that felt like a relic from a different era. Greasy grime coated the stove, dust lay thick on every surface, and a pervasive, damp smell clung to the air. Harper, practical as ever, immediately assessed the task. "Okay, you take the upper cabinets and wipe down the walls. I'll handle this archaeological dig on the stove." Alex pulled on a dust mask, the elastic tugging at his ears. Archaeological dig implies potential treasure. Pretty sure the only treasure here is finding a spot that doesn't harbor a spider colony. Harper adjusted her own mask, the fabric muffling her dry retort. "Speak for yourself. I'm hoping for a forgotten packet of artisanal tea." They worked in tandem, the scraping of spatulas against hardened grease and the rhythmic sweep of brushes filling the space. The silence stretched, occasionally broken by a sigh of frustration or a muttered curse. There was an undeniable awkwardness, a decade of history and recent tension simmering just beneath the surface of their forced cooperation. Harper focused on the stubborn, layered dirt, using it as a shield against acknowledging Alex's presence just a few feet away. She could see him in her peripheral vision, the way his shoulder muscles flexed as he reached high, the slight crinkle around his eyes even behind the mask. It was unsettlingly familiar, and yet they were strangers sharing a battlefield of domestic decay. By midday, the kitchen was still far from pristine, but a noticeable dent had been made. The air felt lighter, the smell less oppressive. They took a break on the back porch, peeling off their masks and gulping down lukewarm water from reusable bottles. Alex wiped sweat from his brow. "Seriously, who let this place get this bad? My grandmother lived here alone for a long time," Harper said, her voice softer than it had been in days. "The upkeep must have been overwhelming." She looked out at the overgrown garden, the skeletal remains of rose bushes tangled with weeds. It was another task looming, one she felt a strange pull towards. "Yeah," Alex conceded. "It's a lot." He glanced at her. "But you're good at this." "Organized?" Harper shrugged, a faint blush touching her cheeks. "It's just logistics. Break it down into smaller problems." It was how she approached her research, how she approached anything daunting. Identify the variables, find solutions, but this felt different. This wasn't just a scientific problem, it was personal, laced with memory and obligation. Over the next few days, they fell into a tentative rhythm. Mornings were dedicated to tackling a new area, a dusty guest room, a long, neglected hallway. They discovered stubborn stains, creaky floorboards, and surprising drafts. Their dialogue slowly shifted. The sharp barbs didn't vanish entirely, but they were interspersed with pragmatic discussions about repairs, shared frustrations over broken tools, and even moments of unintentional humor. "Think this wallpaper predates the internet?" Alex quipped as they struggled to peel a particularly stubborn section. "Probably," Harper grunted, pulling harder. "Might find a hidden message from the original builder under here. Abandon all hope, ye who enter this restoration." Alex laughed, a genuine sound that surprised Harper. "You're probably right. Here, try this side." He adjusted his grip, and together they managed to peel off a large sheet, revealing the slightly less faded wall beneath. It was a small victory, but a shared one. They developed unspoken routines. Alex was better at lifting heavy things and figuring out stubborn mechanical issues, a skill honed, perhaps, by dealing with boat engines or research equipment, while Harper had an eye for detail and was meticulous with cleaning and assessing damage. He'd hand her a tool without asking, she'd point out a patch of mold he'd missed. There were times their hands would brush as they reached for the same rag or bucket, and they would both pull back quickly, a flicker of something unreadable passing between them before they returned to the task at hand. It was an uneasy truce, built on dust motes and elbow grease, but it was holding. One rainy afternoon, following the chapter plan they'd loosely mapped out, starting with the public areas and moving towards potentially useful spaces, they ventured into what Alara had called her study, a room tucked away at the back of the ground floor, smelling of old paper and neglect. It seemed a likely place to find clues, perhaps even the notes Mrs. Gable had mentioned. The room was filled with dusty boxes, an imposing, clutter-strewn desk, and shelves overflowing with forgotten books and papers. "All right," Alex said, pushing open a creaky door that likely hadn't been opened in years. Let's see what kind of secrets Grandma Alara was hiding in here. Harper felt a prickle of unease, mixed with curiosity. Alara had always been a bit of an enigma, warm but private. She hadn't expected to find anything particularly revealing, maybe just old bills or dusty novels. They started systematically, Harper tackling the desk drawers while Alex began sifting through boxes piled near the window. The air grew thick with disturbed dust. Harper found dried-up pens, tangled paper clips, and stacks of correspondence from decades past. Then, tucked into a bottom drawer beneath a stack of old invoices, she found a small, ornate wooden box. "Hey, look at this," she called out, her voice hushed. Alex came over, wiping dust from his hands. Harper lifted the lid. Inside, nestled amongst tissue paper, were photographs. Not recent ones, but faded, black and white images and slightly yellowed color prints from the 70s and 80s. The first few were generic landscapes of the coastline, boats in the harbor. Then she found one of Alara, younger, laughing on the steps of the Salty Air Inn, her arm linked with a man Harper didn't recognize. Another showed Alara in the garden, trowel in hand, dirt smudged on her cheek, a look of pure joy on her face. Harper picked up the photo of Alara in the garden. "I barely remember her doing this," she murmured, a pang of regret twisting in her chest. Her memories of Alara were mostly indoors, quiet afternoons reading or sharing tea. Alex leaned closer. "She looks happy, really happy." He pointed to another photo. "Is that the inn when it was actually functional?" It was a vibrant color photo of the inn, flags flying from the porch, window boxes overflowing with flowers, people sitting in Adirondack chairs. It was a stark contrast to the decaying building around them. Looking at the photos, seeing the life that had once thrived here, deepened Harper's sense of obligation. This wasn't just a building. It was a place that had held joy, a place her grandmother had clearly loved deeply. Continuing their search, Harper unearthed a stack of old guest books. They flipped through them, reading faded signatures and brief, happy notes from visitors decades ago. "Lovely stay. Best sunrise view on the coast. We'll definitely be back." "Wow," Alex said, tracing a line of cursive script. "People really loved this place." "They did," Harper agreed, a new resolve hardening her expression. These weren't just dusty relics, they were testaments to the inn's past, a past worth fighting for. In one of the desk drawers, tucked behind a false back, Harper found a collection of journals and notebooks. They were Alara's, filled with her distinctive handwriting. Some seemed to be personal jottings, but others were different. They were filled with intricate sketches of plants, detailed drawings of coastal flora, wildflowers, marine algae, and specific entries about the inn's neglected garden. There were notes on soil types, sunlight exposure, and observations about the local ecosystem. Harper felt a jolt of recognition, then excitement. These were botanical notes, specific and scientific. Alara, the quiet, private woman she'd known, had possessed a deep knowledge and passion for the natural world, a passion that mirrored Harper's own, one she'd never known they shared. "Look at this, Alex," Harper said, her voice full of wonder. She showed him the detailed sketches. "These are incredible, and these notes?" She wasn't just dabbling. She understood the local ecology. Alex, a marine biologist, immediately grasped the significance. "Wow, I had no idea. She really cared about this place, didn't she? Not just the building, but the land, the surroundings." He paused, looking from the notebooks to Harper. "This garden, she must have had plans for it." Harper felt a surge of emotion. All her life, she'd felt a disconnect from her family, her passion for science viewed with polite confusion or disapproval by her mother. Finding this shared interest, this hidden depth in her grandmother, felt like discovering a missing piece of herself, a connection across generations she'd never known existed. It transformed the task of saving the inn from a resented obligation into something profoundly personal. Alara hadn't just left them a burden, she had left them a legacy, intertwined with the very things Harper and Alex were passionate about: the natural world, preservation, understanding complex systems. As they organized the discovered items, carefully placing the photos and notebooks aside, the weight of the task shifted. It wasn't just about fulfilling a quirky will. It was about honoring Alara, about understanding what she saw in this crumbling building and its neglected grounds, about protecting it from those who would see it merely as real estate to be exploited. Later that afternoon, as they were taking a brief respite on the porch, discussing the potential scope of work revealed by their discoveries, a plain white envelope was slipped through the mail slot in the front door. The sound echoed slightly in the quiet house. Harper, closest to the door, retrieved it. It was addressed to the owners of the Salty Air Inn. The return address was from a company she didn't recognize at first, then the name clicked: Thorne and Associates. Sterling Thorne. A knot formed in Harper's stomach. This was it. The whispers Mrs. Gable had mentioned, the threat Alex had heard about. It was real. She ripped open the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a formal letter, professionally worded, expressing interest in purchasing the property at Inn Street address. It outlined a brief proposal, stating their company specialized in coastal development and revitalization and saw significant potential for the location. At the bottom, a figure was listed as their initial offer. Harper's eyes widened, then narrowed in disbelief and indignation. The offer was laughably low, an insultingly opportunistic amount that barely scratched the surface of what the property, even in its current state, was worth, let alone its historical significance. She handed the letter to Alex, her face pale. "Look." Alex read it quickly, his jaw tightening. "Thorne and Associates. Knew it. They've been sniffing around properties further up the coast too, buying them up cheap." He scoffed at the figure. "Are they serious? That's pocket change for a property like this, even falling apart." "It's not just an offer," Harper said, her voice cold. "It's a threat. They know it's in disrepair, they probably know about the will, the condition. They think we're desperate, that we'll jump at the first offer." Alex folded the letter, his expression grim. "They want to tear it down, put up some soulless modern complex probably. Something that has nothing to do with Port Blossom." The guest books, the faded photos of Alara's joy, the detailed botanical sketches, they flashed through Harper's mind. Alara's legacy wasn't just the burden of this crumbling house. It was her quiet passion, her connection to this place, the memories of the life the inn had held. And this man, Thorne, wanted to erase all of it for a quick profit. A fierce wave of protectiveness washed over Harper, surprising her with its intensity. She hadn't wanted to be here, hadn't wanted this responsibility, but seeing the concrete threat, seeing her grandmother's life laid bare in those discovered items, changed everything. "We can't let him," she said, her voice firm. Alex looked at her, a spark of understanding in his eyes that mirrored her own resolve. "No. We can't. Alara loved this place," Harper continued, thinking of the photos, the garden notes. "Mrs. Gable said she saw potential in us in saving the inn. Maybe this whole thing wasn't just a weird condition in a will. Maybe she knew this was coming." "Maybe," Alex agreed, nodding slowly. "She was a smart woman." He looked out at the harbor, then back at the dilapidated facade of the inn. "Okay, so cleaning and patching isn't enough. We need to do more than just fulfill the will's conditions. We need to figure out how to save this place, really save it." Harper felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since arriving in Port Blossom. It wasn't just about escaping, about getting back to her life. It was about fighting for something real, something with history and heart, something that connected her to her grandmother in a way she'd never anticipated. The tension that had crackled between them for decades, then settled into a fragile armistice, now shifted. In the quiet aftermath of shared discovery, surrounded by the dust and ghosts of Alara's past, Harper met Alex's eyes. The words were simple, a pact forged in shared resolve: they would fight. Not just to defend crumbling walls, but to understand the woman who left this legacy, to unravel the secrets hidden within the inn's forgotten corners and the land it stood upon. Their alliance was born of necessity, a shield against a common enemy in Sterling Thorne, whose shadow already stretched long over Port Blossom. But standing together, the air between Harper and Alex hummed with a different energy, a nascent connection that went deeper than their shared purpose, whispering of possibilities neither had anticipated. As they looked out at the gray sky pressing down on the harbor, a new path forward began to dimly light, hinting that the key to saving Alara's inn might lie not just in its sturdy bones, but in the wild, untamed heart of the coast itself, a secret interwoven with Alara's past, waiting for them to uncover it. The shared resolve forged in Alara's dusty study held firm, a pact against the encroaching shadow of Sterling Thorn, but the inn's air still felt thick with history and unresolved tension. As hours bled into night, escaping those walls felt necessary, drawing Harper and Alex down to the silent, moonlit expanse of Driftwood Beach. There, beneath a sky vast and indifferent to the weight of their task, they finally saw each other not through the harsh lens of their past, but under a different, softer light, illuminating possibilities neither had dared consider before. Dust motes still danced in Harper's vision, remnants of the day spent wrestling with cobwebs and ancient grime in the inn's forgotten storage rooms. Her shoulders ached, her hands were rough despite gloves, and her mind buzzed with the sheer impossibility of the task ahead. They had cleared out mounds of junk, finding little of value beyond sentimental relics, and the sheer scale of the structural repairs loomed larger with every hour. Dinner had been a quiet, microwave pizza affair eaten standing up in the still bare kitchen, the forced proximity amplifying the strange new current that ran between them since the Thorn offer. "I can't look at another dusty box," Harper announced, collapsing onto the porch swing later, the salty night air a blessed relief. Alex, leaning against a porch pillar, ran a hand through his already tousled dark hair. "Tell me about it. My lungs feel like they're lined with antique upholstery." He paused, looking out at the sliver of moon reflecting on the black water of the harbor. "Need to clear my head." It was an unspoken invitation, an escape. "Driftwood Beach?" Harper asked, her voice low. It was their spot, or a asterisk spot from back then, a place of hushed secrets and quiet escapes. He nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture in the dim light. "Yeah, Driftwood." The drive was short, the windows down, letting the cool, damp air wash over them. The silence wasn't awkward this time. It felt comfortable, shared exhaustion and mutual need for quiet. When they arrived, the beach was deserted, just the rhythmic hush of waves meeting sand and the lonely cry of a distant gull. Moonlight painted the gnarled driftwood sculptures in silver and shadow, making the familiar landscape feel otherworldly. They walked side by side along the waterline, the sand cool beneath their bare feet. The tension of the inn, of Thorn, of their complicated past, seemed to dissipate with every step, carried away by the tide. "It's weird, isn't it?" Harper said finally, kicking at a piece of kelp. Alex glanced at her. "The inn, Thorn, everything," she clarified. "This, us, being back here, fighting for something I thought I wanted to forget." He stopped, turning towards the ocean. "You wanted to forget Port Blossom? I wanted to escape it," she corrected softly. "It felt small, stagnant, like nothing ever changed, and I felt stuck." "Fair enough," he said, his voice quiet. "I felt the pull away, too. Different reasons, maybe, but the need to see what else was out there. But you came back." He shrugged, turning back to face her. The moonlight illuminated the planes of his face, softening the sharp angles she remembered from high school. "It's home. My family's here. The ocean here, it's unique. I missed it more than I expected." He paused. "And after my research project wrapped up, Port Blossom had an opening at the Marine Lab." It felt right. They continued walking, the gap between them slowly closing. The vastness of the ocean, the quiet intimacy of the deserted beach, the shared history they were slowly unearthing, it all conspired to create a sense of vulnerability neither could deny. "I was so sure this summer was going to be hell," Harper admitted, looking down at the sand. "Stuck here, with you, of all people." She risked a glance up, a small smile playing on her lips. "No offense." "None taken," he chuckled, the sound warm in the night air. "I had similar thoughts about you. The intensely focused, knows-all-the-answers botanist, judging everything that isn't perfectly structured and predictable." "Hey," she protested lightly. "Just being honest," he said, stepping closer. The air shifted, growing warmer despite the cool breeze off the water. His eyes, dark in the moonlight, searched hers. "Turns out you're not quite that person anymore. And you're not just the annoyingly charming marine biology golden boy I remember." "Good," he said, his voice dropping to a low register that sent a shiver down her spine. "Because I've been seeing something else entirely lately." He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was light, tentative, but it ignited a spark that had been simmering beneath the surface of their shared frustrations and reluctant truce. The old rivalry, the years of distance, the stress of the inn, it all faded away, leaving only the two of them, the moonlight and the undeniable pull drawing them closer. He didn't ask. She didn't pull away. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every chance to stop him, her breath hitched in her throat. The scent of salt and something uniquely him filled her senses. His lips met hers softly at first, a tentative brush, a question. Harper answered by leaning into him, deepening the kiss. Years of unresolved tension, competitive sparks, and now, shared purpose and unexpected intimacy, converged in that moment on the beach. It wasn't a fiery, dramatic kiss, but a slow, tender exploration, a silent acknowledgement of the profound shift that had occurred between them. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her gently against him. She tangled her fingers in his hair, savoring the feel of his lips, the soft rasp of his cheek against hers. When they finally broke apart, they stayed close, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was thick with unspoken emotions, with the weight of what had just happened. Harper was the first to pull back fully, a flush creeping up her neck. "Okay," she whispered, feeling breathless. "Okay." Alex let out a shaky breath, his eyes still locked on hers. "Yeah, okay." He didn't smile, but his gaze was soft, bewildered, hopeful. "That complicates things. You think?" She managed a weak laugh, her heart hammering against her ribs. "No regrets," he said firmly, stepping back but keeping his eyes on her. "But yeah, complicated." She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "The inn, Thorn. Our lives outside this weird summer. We figure it out," he said, stepping forward again, reaching out to cup her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed gently below her eyes, "like we figure out the inn." It wasn't a grand declaration, but a quiet promise. A new pact layered over the old one, forged not in dust and frustration, but under a different light on a moonlit beach between two people who thought they knew exactly what they were, only to discover they were something else entirely together. Over the next week, their days settled into a new rhythm. The awkwardness from the beach lingered, a subtle current beneath their interactions, but it didn't freeze them. Instead, it seemed to thaw something else. They found themselves talking more easily, laughing more often, the sharp edges of their old rivalry smoothed by shared late nights, tired jokes, and the undeniable fact of that kiss. They took short breaks from the relentless cleaning and repair work. One afternoon, they wandered through the small Port Blossom summer market set up near the harbor. Harper bought a jar of local blueberry jam. Alex picked up a battered old copy of a marine biology textbook from a second-hand stall. They walked the harbor walk, watching the fishing boats come in, sharing stories about their university years, their worst jobs, the places they'd traveled. Harper talked about her research in humid greenhouses and remote jungles, the precision and patience it required. Alex spoke of the vastness of the ocean, the delicate balance of ecosystems, the thrill of discovery beneath the waves. They saw the passion in each other's eyes, a mirror of their own drive, previously only seen as competitive fire. They even risked a trip to the Tides and Times Cafe. The aroma of coffee and cinnamon filled the air, a welcome change from the inn's musty smell. As they sat at a small table by the window, sipping lattes, Harper noticed the subtle shift in the way people looked at them, not just the return of the prodigal Harper Lane, but Harper Lane with Alex Rivera *. Old Mrs. Higgins from the bakery across the street gave them a knowing smile as she passed. Two fishermen hunched over coffee at the counter lowered their voices as they looked their way. "Seems like news travels fast in Port Blossom," Harper murmured, feeling a faint blush rise. Alex grinned, unbothered. "Always has. Probably took bets on whether we'd kill each other by now." Their conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from the maddeningly slow progress at the inn to the upcoming town seafood festival. It felt normal, like a date, a thought that both thrilled and terrified Harper. Then, the normalcy shattered. They were back at the inn late one afternoon, covered in paint splatter and sawdust from tackling a particularly stubborn section of peeling trim, when a sleek black car pulled up the gravel drive. A man in a sharp suit got out, clutching a briefcase, followed by another younger man with a tablet. Alex and Harper exchanged a look. Thorn, or one of his representatives. The man, introduced as Mr. Silas Croft, a senior associate from Sterling Thorne and Associates, didn't mince words. He presented them with a new offer, significantly higher than the first, but with a non-negotiable deadline: 1 week. "Mr. Thorne is a very busy man," Croft said smoothly, though his eyes were cold. "He admires your grandmother's property, its prime location, but he understands there are significant challenges. The structural issues, the required renovations, they are considerable undertakings, particularly for individuals without extensive experience in property development or the necessary capital." He paused, letting that sink in. "Frankly, your efforts, while admirable, are simply not realistic within the timeframe required to secure permits and begin construction before the next season. Mr. Thorne is offering a way out. A generous one, given the state of the property." He slid a folder across the dusty table they'd cleared in the hallway. Inside was the offer letter, crisp and formal, and a glossy brochure outlining Harbor Vista, a planned luxury condominium complex, with an artist's rendering showing a sleek, modern building standing exactly where the salty air inn currently stood. Harper felt a surge of cold anger. It wasn't just about the money, it was about erasure. About replacing history, character, and memory with something generic and sterile. "And if we don't accept?" Alex asked, his voice dangerously calm. Croft smiled, a thin, unpleasant expression. "Mr. Thorne is prepared to explore other avenues, perhaps bringing the property's code violations to the attention of the city, or highlighting concerns about its structural integrity to local authorities. These things can cause considerable delay, expense, and public scrutiny. He's also aware of some local chatter regarding the viability of your project. It's unfortunate how quickly rumors can spread in a small town." He looked directly at Harper. "Especially rumors questioning whether the current occupants have the means or the expertise to manage such a complex restoration. People talk, Ms. Lane, and Mr. Thorne has many associates who are, shall we say, well-connected." The implied threat, linking Thorne's pressure to the whispers in town, landed like a punch. Thorne wasn't just making offers, he was actively trying to undermine them, using the town's gossip network against them. Harper thought of the looks at the cafe, the lowered voices. Had some of that been Thorne's doing? "We have no intention of selling," Harper said, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed fury. Croft's smile didn't waver. "A pity. The offer expires in precisely 7 days. I trust you'll consider it carefully. And perhaps reconsider the feasibility of your little restoration project." With that, he stood, the young man with the tablet following. They walked back to the car, their footsteps crunching on the gravel, leaving behind the heavy silence and the weight of the threat. Harper and Alex stood there for a long moment, the glossy brochure depicting the inn's replacement lying mockingly on the table. "He's playing dirty," Alex said, picking up the brochure and crumpling it in his fist. "Using rumors, that's low," Harper added, her hands clenched. The resolve from the beach from their quiet moments together hardened into fierce determination. Thorne wanted to fight? Fine. Harper walked over to where Alara's journals were stacked. She hadn't looked at them much since that first day, overwhelmed by the task of cleaning. But Croft's words, his dismissal of their expertise, sparked something. She remembered Alara's detailed drawings, the hidden passion. Mrs. Gable had mentioned Alara saw potential in Harper's green thumb, linking her to the inn in a way Harper hadn't fully grasped. She pulled out one of the thick notebooks, flipping through the pages filled with pressed flowers, sketches of leaves, and elegant cursive. But she also saw notes about soil composition, tide charts, and observations about the coastal flora and fauna unique to Port Blossom. "Alara wasn't just drawing pretty pictures," Harper murmured, tracing a sketch of a resilient-looking dune grass. "She was really studying this place, the ecology of the coastline around the inn." Alex came over, looking over her shoulder. He pointed to a page with sketches of periwinkles and barnacles clinging to rocks. She was charting the intertidal zone, too. And look, notes on the migratory birds that stop here. A slow, exciting realization dawned on Harper. Her grandmother, the quiet woman who ran a dusty inn, had been a secret, keen observer of the natural world right on her doorstep. She loved this place, Harper said, not just the building, but the land it sat on, the delicate ecosystem of the harbor and the beach. She wasn't just saving the inn for its history. Maybe she knew there was something else valuable here. Croft's words echoed in her mind, prime location asterisk. Thorne wanted the land, the view. But maybe that land held a secret defense. Harper looked up at Alex, her eyes bright with a new kind of purpose. My botany, your marine biology, we've been cleaning, fixing, but what if the key to saving the inn is inside the building? Alex followed her thought, a flicker of excitement in his own eyes, replacing the anger from moments before. You think there's ecological significance. Something that could make it harder for Thorne to just tear it down. Ilara's notes go back years, Harper said, flipping through another journal. Detailed observations of local species, growth patterns, environmental changes, it's more than just a hobby. It's years of fieldwork documentation right here on this property and the coastline next to it. She tapped the page. If this area is a unique habitat, or home to protected species, or vital to the local ecosystem, it could trigger environmental protections. Zoning challenges Thorne might not have anticipated. It was a long shot, a desperate idea born of frustration and a grandmother's hidden legacy. But it felt right. It felt like fighting back using their strengths, using the very knowledge Thorne's man had subtly mocked them for lacking. My lab has mapping software, species databases, tide data, Alex said, already thinking. We can cross-reference her observations, identify potential sensitive areas, maybe do some fieldwork ourselves. Harper felt a surge of energy, the first genuine sense of control they'd had since Thorne appeared. This wasn't just about fulfilling a will or even honoring a building. It was about protecting something vital, something Ilara had clearly cherished, using the skills she had honed over years away from Port Blossom. She looked at Alex, the shared determination in his eyes mirroring her own. The kiss on the beach, the quiet moments together, the slow blooming of attraction, it was all interwoven now with this fight. They weren't just rivals anymore, or even reluctant partners. They were a team, bound by a shared threat, a shared history, and a blossoming connection that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The faded ink in Ilara's journals had guided them, pulling their gaze away from the dust motes dancing in the inn's attic and towards the shimmering, complex ecosystem of Port Blossom's coastline. This wasn't just a property dispute anymore. It was a fight for the very soul of the place Ilara had loved, one etched into the tidal pools and native plants she'd so meticulously documented. Harper, her fingers still tingling from tracing Ilara's loops, knew that the key wasn't just asterisk finding asterisk secrets, but understanding how they could be leveraged. How her grandmother's observations of the unique flora, combined with Alex's intimate knowledge of the marine life, might form an unassailable defense against Thorne's bulldozers. But time, measured now in the ticking countdown to Sterling Thorne's deadline, was a relentless tide. They had the map in Ilara's notes, pointing towards potential legal footholds or undeniable ecological truths hidden along the shore. Unlocking these secrets, digging deep into the roots of Ilara's legacy and Port Blossom's history, would require everything they had: their combined knowledge, their burgeoning partnership, and a fierce resolve to protect what was priceless. The coming days would be a relentless search for the definitive proof, a race against the clock that promised not only revelations about the land, but perhaps about themselves, pushing their bond to its limits just as the ultimate confrontation loomed. Roots and revelations, climax buildup, the race was on. With Sterling Thorne's aggressive ultimatum echoing in their minds and Ilara's detailed journals spread across a makeshift table in the dusty attic, Harper and Alex began the deep dive, their combined expertise now their most potent weapon. They sifted through decades of records, searching for the legal loophole, the forgotten conservation status, or the irrefutable ecological truth Ilara's notes hinted at, anything that could turn the tide against the developer. Every faded document, every sketch of a shoreline plant or tidal creature, felt charged with urgent potential, a desperate hope against the relentless pressure building outside the inn's walls. Dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight cutting through the attic's grime-coated window. Harper sat hunched over a stack of brittle town planning documents from the late 1970s, her brow furrowed in concentration. Alex was nearby, scrolling through scanned newspaper archives on his laptop, searching for any mention of Alara, the salty air in, or unusual land designations. The air was thick with the smell of old paper, dust, and a faint hint of desperation. "Nothing here about hazardous waste," Alex muttered, closing a browser tab with a sigh. "Or any public nuisance complaints Alara might have faced. Thorne's threats about using code violations and rumors feel hollow based on this." She kept everything meticulously above board. Harper didn't look up. She would asterisk have. Gran wasn't one for cutting corners, not on something she loved. Her finger traced a line in a lengthy zoning ordinance. "Wait, what's this? Coastal Preservation Overlay District C4? Alex leaned closer. C4, never heard of that. Port Blossom only has C1, C2, and C3 coastal zones, mostly related to storm surge and public access. This document is from '78, Harper said, pulling it carefully from the pile. It's an addendum to the original zoning map. C. Properties bordering Little Salt Bay and demonstrating unique ecological characteristics or historical horticultural significance are subject to C4 overlay, restricting development incompatible with preservation goals. Unique ecological characteristics, Alex trailed off, his eyes wide. Like maybe, the kind Alara was documenting. Harper fumbled for Alara's most recent journal, finding a page filled with detailed sketches of a small, delicate flowering plant and notes about its habitat. She mentions the Little Salt Bay boundary repeatedly. And look at this, sketches of specific tide pool organisms annotated with indicator species for C4 viability. Their eyes met. A spark ignited between them, cutting through the dust and tension. She knew, Harper breathed. She didn't just document it, she fought for this designation. And somehow it got buried, Alex finished. Maybe never fully codified or forgotten with changing administrations. But if we can prove the inn's property, or the coastline right next to it, still meets the criteria for C4, that could shut Thorne down completely, or at least make it legally impossible for him to build a massive luxury complex. "This is it," Harper said, carefully folding the brittle document. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sudden surge of adrenaline and hope. "This is the loophole." "Okay, Plan B is officially Plan A," Alex said, a grin spreading across his face. "We need to get down to the shoreline and the grounds. Confirm the ecological part. We need proof this place still qualifies for C4. They scrambled out of the attic, the newfound energy propelling them down the creaking stairs. The threat from Thorne was still immense, but now they had a direction, a tangible weapon Alara had left them. Stepping out of the inn and onto the slightly overgrown path leading towards the rocky coastline and tidal pools, the air immediately felt different, cooler, briny, alive. Harper knelt near a patch of resilient coastal grasses, Alara's botanical journal open beside her. "Alara's notes here mention Salicornia virginica thriving in this exact spot," Harper murmured, scanning the ground. "Glasswort. It's common, but she also details a rare variant she'd cultivated, specifically adapted to this soil composition." Alex was already down by the tide pools, his marine biologist's eye scanning the complex miniature ecosystems left by the receding tide. "She documented a specific species of small periwinkle snail here," he called out. "Needs a very narrow salinity range and presence of certain algae. If they're here and thriving, it backs up her claims about a unique, stable intertidal habitat. They worked with focused intensity, the rhythmic crash of waves providing a backdrop to their quiet collaboration." Harper carefully examined the flora, her fingers gentle on stems and leaves, identifying species, comparing them to Alara's detailed sketches. She found the glasswort, and among the common variety, a few clumps that matched Alara's description of the rare variant, slightly larger, with a distinct reddish hue. "They're here," she announced, a thrill running through her. "Just like she described, it's a specific microclimate, a cultivated adaptation." Alex returned from the tide pools, equally triumphant. "And the periwinkles are there, hundreds of them, exactly where Alara marked them. This isn't just a random patch of coast, it's a specific, possibly rare, intertidal zone she carefully monitored." The C4 designation wasn't just based on theory, it was based on this asterisk. They stood together, looking at the coastline, then back at the old inn perched on the rise. The crumbling facade, the peeling paint, it all seemed less like decay now, and more like a protective shell for the life and history within. She didn't just love this place, Harper said, a lump forming in her throat. She was its protector. She built this into the legal framework. And left us the map to find it, Alex added softly. She must have known, somehow, that it might be needed. Empowered by their discovery, they returned to the inn, the weight of Thorne's threat lessened slightly by the potential power of their findings. The pressure was still immense, the deadline ticking down, but they had a fighting chance now. They had proof. Back inside, fueled by cold coffee and residual adrenaline, they started outlining their strategy, integrating the C4 zoning detail with the ecological proof. The conversation flowed easily, their minds working in tandem, bouncing ideas off each other. It felt natural, comfortably collaborative, like their time on the beach, but with a sharper, shared purpose. Then, the mood shifted. Harper, sorting through some of Alara's scattered papers on the dining table, found a faded, unsent letter addressed to her, tucked inside a book. She unfolded it, her grandmother's familiar, slightly shaky script filling the page. It was dated shortly before Alara's death. "My dearest Harper," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then things have unfolded as I feared they might. I have made arrangements. In my will that may initially cause you frustration, particularly your cohabitation with young Mr. Rivera. I understand the history between you, my dear, the academic rivalry, the quiet competition." Alara paused, a strange coldness creeping into her stomach as she read the next sentence. "Stemming from the misunderstanding surrounding the marine biology scholarship application all those years ago. He believed you deliberately withheld information about the deadline, and you, I know, felt unfairly judged by his quick assumption. It was a simple oversight on my part, mentioning the early submission option to one of you, forgetting to tell the other. A foolish mistake that created needless distance." Harper's breath hitched. The scholarship, senior year. The one Alex got, the one she missed the early deadline for, the one she'd convinced herself he must have somehow gained an advantage on, fueling years of silent resentment. It wasn't a misunderstanding asterisk about asterisk it. It was a core piece of their rivalry, a perceived betrayal on her end, a quick judgment on his, magnified by years of silence. Alex thought asterisk she had intentionally sabotaged him, all because of a simple oversight. She looked at Alex, who was sketching a diagram of the tide pool habitat on a notepad, completely unaware. All the years of quiet anger, the competitive jabs, the underlying assumption that he was ruthless and self-serving, built on a misunderstanding, amplified by asterisk Alara's asterisk mistake. Shame and a fresh wave of hurt washed over her. Hurt that Alex thought that of her, hurt that Alara hadn't clarified it sooner, hurt at the wasted years of animosity. "Alex," her voice was small, tight. He looked up, sensing the shift in her tone. "Yeah, what is it?" Harper held up the letter, her hand trembling again, this time from burgeoning anger and pain. Did you think I deliberately kept quiet about the marine biology scholarship deadline back in high school?" Alex's easy smile vanished. His posture stiffened. "Where did that come from?" "Just answer the question," she pushed, her voice rising. He hesitated, then his jaw tightened. "At the time, yeah, it seemed convenient. You were always hyper-aware of deadlines, and you wanted that scholarship. And you actually believed I would do something like that?" The words felt like a physical blow. All this time, all their careful steps towards trust, built on shifting sand if he fundamentally believed she was capable of such a thing. "I didn't no asterisk," he defended, though his eyes held a flicker of the old defensiveness. "It just seemed plausible then. Why?" "What is this about?" "It was Alara," Harper said, her voice thick with emotion. "She mentions it here. She told you about the early submission, forgot to tell me. It was her mistake, not some calculated move on my part." Alex's face paled slightly. He looked from the letter in her hand to her face, a dawning horror mixing with disbelief. "Her mistake? You're serious?" "Yes, I'm serious." Harper slammed the letter onto the table, the flimsy paper fluttering. Years. Years we wasted, years of being rivals, building up this wall between us, partly because you thought I was some kind of cutthroat saboteur. Harper, I didn't no. Alex stood up, his chair scraping back. It was high school, things seemed different, and we were rivals, yeah, but you still held onto that belief. She countered, tears welling. Even now, after everything? That was then, he argued, stepping towards her. I haven't thought about that specific incident in years, not in that light. Oh, haven't you? Harper scoffed, the pain twisting into bitterness. Or is it just convenient now when we need to work together? What else do you conveniently believe about me, Alex? That's not fair. His voice was sharp, echoing in the suddenly tense room. I've been here, putting everything into this, with you. I thought you were the one who still saw me as the cocky rival. You never let up on the sarcasm, the digs about my career choices. Because I thought you thought I was a cheat, she retorted, the argument spiraling, dredging up every buried resentment. We were never on equal footing because you had this idea of who I was. And maybe you had an idea of who I was. He shot back, his frustration boiling over. Maybe I just stayed in Port Blossom because it's where I want to be, not because I'm small town and unambitious like you always seem to imply. The accusations hung in the air, sharp and ugly, slicing through the fragile connection they had built. The hope and shared triumph from moments before evaporated, replaced by raw hurt and the bitter taste of old wounds reopened. They stood facing each other, chests heaving, the silence between them heavier than any dust in the attic. The shrill, insistent ringing of the olden phone shattered the tense standoff. It seemed impossibly loud in the sudden quiet. They both flinched, then looked at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Alex, his jaw tight, walked over and picked it up, his eyes still fixed on Harper. Salty air in. His expression hardened further as he listened. Harper watched him, her heart pounding, the argument with Alex momentarily pushed aside by the external threat they had almost forgotten in their personal turmoil. Yes, Mr. Thorne, Alex said, his voice cold, devoid of the earlier anger directed at Harper. We received your previous offer, and our answer hasn't changed. He paused, listening, then let out a short, humorless laugh. A public relations campaign? Legal action based on what exactly? The structural integrity of a building your offer implies you tear down anyway. Harper took a step closer, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, trying to read his face. Your offer is insufficient, Mr. Thorne, Alex stated clearly. The Salty Air Inn is not for sale, not to you. Another pause, longer this time. Alex's grip on the receiver tightened. 1 week was already generous. Your new deadline of 48 hours. That's absurd. He listened again, his eyes flickering to Harper. We have reason to believe there are complexities regarding this property's designation that might complicate your plans, Mr. Thorne, significant complexities. He was hinting at the C4 overlay. Harper felt a surge of grudging respect, even through the fresh pain of their argument. He was already leveraging their discovery. Threats won't work, Mr. Thorne, Alex finished, his voice calm but laced with steel. You have our answer. Don't call here again. He hung up the phone with a decisive click, the sound echoing in the strained silence. He turned back to Harper, the cold resolve on his face slowly softening as he met her gaze, which was a mixture of lingering anger, hurt, and newfound apprehension. He knows something's up, Alex said quietly, running a hand through his hair. He upped the offer slightly, but mostly it was threats. Legal action, public smear campaign, using local rumors against us. And he gave us 48 hours. Says his timeline has accelerated. 48 hours. The revelation about Alara, the argument that had just ripped through their tentative peace, the crucial C4 evidence they needed to deploy, all crammed into the next 2 days. Thorne's cool voice delivered the final blow, 48 hours. The deadline wasn't just a ticking clock on the Salty Air Inn. It was a stark measurement of the distance between Harper and Alex. They had the proof, the faint hope of saving everything, but at the very moment they needed to stand as one, they were fractured, raw with unspoken words and old wounds. The storm wasn't on the horizon anymore. It had made landfall, and the rising tide of Thorne's ambition threatened to drown them both. Everything rested on the next 2 days. Alara's legacy, the fragile ecosystem clinging to the coast, the vibrant life Harper was fighting to protect. And between them, a silent, aching question. Could they bridge the chasm that had opened between them? Could they put aside the pain and uncertainty, face the public, face Thorn, and fight not just for this building, but for the possibility of a future they hadn't dared to truly imagine until now? The climax had arrived, demanding they either find their way back to each other or lose everything, alone. The echoes of Thorn's ultimatum faded, replaced by a silence thick with unspoken words and years of buried pain. 48 hours. The clock was ticking down on the salty air on Alara's legacy, but the most immediate, crushing pressure wasn't external. It was the raw chasm that had opened between Harper and Alex in an instant. Standing just feet apart in the inn's quiet living room, surrounded by the fragile proofs of their shared mission, they faced the devastating truth. They had to find a way back to each other first, or there would be nothing left to save. The air in the living room, usually thick with the scent of dust and old wood, felt charged and thin. The late afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, illuminating motes dancing in the space between them. Harper clutched Alara's letter, her knuckles white. Alex stood near the antique fireplace, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. The easy rapport they'd built over weeks of shared work and quiet moments felt like a fragile shell that had just been violently cracked. So, Harper's voice was low, trembling slightly. Alara knew. Alex finally looked at her, his gaze direct but shadowed with his own confusion and hurt. She knew, and she didn't clarify. Not to either of us. She told *U* about the early deadline for the scholarship application, Harper stated, the old accusation resurfacing despite herself. That's why you applied, why you got it. I missed it because I didn't know until it was too late. The unfairness of it, the years of believing Alex had somehow outmaneuvered her, twisted in her gut. That's what fueled everything, Alex. Our rivalry, my wanting to get as far away from here as possible, from everything that felt rigged. He unfolded his arms, taking a hesitant step toward her. Harper, I swear, I didn't know she hadn't told you. She just mentioned the deadline in passing, said I should get my application in quickly because of it. I thought it was general advice, something she'd told everyone interested. I never imagined she'd deliberately withhold it from you. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. Why would she do that? It doesn't make any sense, unless she somehow thought it would motivate us, push us harder against each other. Harper shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. I don't know, maybe she saw something in us, something competitive she thought we needed to harness, or maybe it was just a mistake. A terrible, devastating mistake. She looked down at the letter, then back at him. But years of animosity, of feeling like you'd stolen something I worked for, it poisoned everything. And I just saw you as the one who never looked back, Alex said, his voice softening slightly. The one who left and never seemed to care about anything here, while I stayed, trying to make a difference. It felt like you judged me for being here, for being Port Blossom. That's not true, Harper countered instantly. I didn't judge you, I was jealous. Jealous that you seemed so comfortable here, that you fit in, that you weren't constantly fighting the urge to run. Her voice cracked. I ran because I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. Not really. Not even with my own family. She gestured around the room, her gaze sweeping over the familiar yet foreign space. Coming back here, facing you, facing all of this. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done. Alex was closer now, close enough that she could see the flicker of understanding, the empathy in his eyes. And I was wrong, he admitted quietly. I made assumptions because I was hurt too. Hurt that the person I always felt this impossible pull towards couldn't wait to get away from the life I was building. The admission hung in the air, impossible pull. It wasn't just rivalry. It hadn't been for a long time, if ever. The kiss on the beach, the shared moments, the fierce protectiveness they felt working side by side, it all rushed in undeniable. Harper let the letter fall to the floor. She took a step towards him, then another, closing the small distance between them. Alex, the scholarship, it hurt. It really hurt. But these past few weeks, working with you, seeing you here, seeing what you care about. She reached out, tentatively touching his arm. His skin felt warm and solid beneath her fingertips. It's changed things, everything. He covered her hand with his, holding it firmly. It has. Harper, what we found in that letter, what we've realized about each other, it's messy and complicated, and yeah, there are still things that scare the hell out of me. His thumb gently stroked the back of her hand. Like what happens after tomorrow. You have your life, your career, probably halfway across the country. I have mine here. The practical challenges loomed, a stark contrast to the fragile bubble of intimacy they were creating. Could they bridge that gap? Could a love born in shared dust, rivalry, and a fight for the past survive futures pulling in different directions? Harper looked up at him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The uncertainty was terrifying, but the thought of letting him go now, after everything, was unbearable. I don't have it all figured out, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. My career, it's important to me, but so is this and you, she squeezed his hand. I don't want to lose you, Alex, not again, not now that I know how I feel. His expression softened, the earlier tension melting away, replaced by a vulnerability that mirrored her own. He lifted his other hand, gently cupping her cheek. You don't have to figure it all out alone, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. We'll figure it out together. He leaned down and their lips met. It wasn't the tentative exploration of the beach kiss or the shared relief after finding the zoning map. This kiss was a promise, a deep, urgent claiming, sealing the commitment they had just made, spoken, and unspoken. It was a desperate hold against the storm waiting for them, a declaration that whatever the future held, they would face it as one. They held each other for a long moment, the scent of dust and salt and each other filling their lungs. The past was acknowledged, the misunderstandings laid bare. The future was uncertain, the challenges real. But standing there, in the heart of the crumbling inn they were fighting to save, they had chosen each other. The personal chasm was bridged, their bond solidified. Now they could face the world. Now they could face Thorn. The Port Blossom Town Hall meeting room was packed. Every seat was taken, people lined the walls, and a low hum of anticipation and gossip filled the air. The folding chairs squeaked under shifting weight, and the air conditioning struggled against the collective body heat and tension. At the front, a long table faced the audience, where 3 members of the town's Historical Preservation Committee sat, looking stoic. To their left sat Sterling Thorne, flanked by a sharp-suited lawyer, exuding an air of arrogant confidence, occasionally offering a dismissive glance at the gathered crowd. To the right sat Harper and Alex, their posture upright, their faces a mixture of nerves and resolve. Mrs. Gable sat in the front row, beaming encouragement. Beside her sat Eleanor Lane, her expression unreadable, but her presence a quiet anchor for Harper. The committee chair, a stern-faced woman named Ms. Albright, cleared her throat. We are here today to consider the future of the property located at 17 Harbor Road, commonly known as the Salty Air Inn. Mr. Sterling Thorne of Sterling Thorne and Associates has submitted a proposal for its acquisition and redevelopment. We will first hear from Mr. Thorne. Thorne rose smoothly, a practiced smile on his face. He spoke of progress, revitalization, bringing modern luxury to Port Blossom. He painted a picture of the inn as a dilapidated eyesore, a drain on the town's historical reputation, best replaced by upscale condominiums that would attract wealthy tourists and boost the local economy. He presented glossy renderings of sleek, modern buildings, conspicuously omitting any trace of the Victorian inn. This property is beyond saving, he declared, his voice smooth and condescending. It represents the past and, frankly, not a particularly glorious one in its current state. My proposal represents the future, prosperity, and a much-needed upgrade for Port Blossom. He didn't mention the inn's history or Alara Lane, focusing solely on the perceived decay and his vision of profitable modernity. Ms. Albright turned to Harper and Alex. Ms. Lane, Mr. Rivera. You are the current owners. Do you wish to make a statement? Harper felt a surge of adrenaline, the fear of public speaking warring with a fierce, protective fire kindled by Thorne's callous dismissal. She gripped the edges of the table for a moment, then stood, Alex rising with her, a silent pillar of support beside her. Thank you, Ms. Albright. My name is Harper Lane, and this is Alex Rivera. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but gained strength as she continued. The Salty Air Inn is not just a property. It was my grandmother, Alara Lane's, home, and it is a vital piece of Port Blossom's history and natural heritage. She held up Alara's botanical journal, its worn cover a testament to years of dedication. My grandmother wasn't just a painter. She was a dedicated observer of the natural world right here on this property. Her journals, spanning decades, meticulously document the ecology of the land surrounding the inn, leading down to Little Salt Bay. Harper opened the journal, flipping to pages filled with precise drawings and detailed notes. What Mr. Thorne dismisses as a dilapidated eyesore sits on land with unique ecological significance. Specifically, the grounds contain a rare cultivated variant of glasswort, a salt-tolerant plant found only in specific coastal marsh conditions. My grandmother cultivated this variety herself, and its presence here, thriving for over 40 years, is a testament to her expertise and the stable microecosystem she nurtured. She pointed to a page with sketches and measurements. The health of this plant is an indicator of a thriving coastal habitat, one that takes decades to develop and is incredibly fragile. Alex stepped forward, holding a small jar containing water and a few tiny snails. Building on Harper's findings, my own observations as a marine biologist confirm the ecological value of the coastline adjoining the inn property. We've found healthy populations of indicator species, like Littoria periwinkle snails, which are sensitive to pollution and habitat disruption. Their presence, alongside the flora Harper mentioned, indicates a unique and stable intertidal ecosystem directly impacted by the runoff and habitat provided by the inn's grounds. He looked directly at the committee, then at the townspeople. Mr. Thorne's plan involves significant construction, dredging, and alteration of the coastline. Based on the ecological evidence we've gathered, this development would decimate this unique habitat, a habitat Harper Lane dedicated her life to observing and, I believe, protecting. Harper picked up a faded document, the zoning addendum they'd found in the attic. My grandmother didn't just observe. We believe she actively worked to protect this area. We found this document, a 1978 zoning addendum establishing a coastal preservation overlay district, C4, for properties near Little Salt Bay exhibiting unique ecological or horticultural characteristics. The description in the addendum perfectly matches the features Alara documented on the inn's property. We believe she was instrumental in establishing this overlay, specifically to protect this land. Thorne scoffed, leaning into his microphone. Nonsense. Sentimental ramblings and some old weeds. This C4 district, if it even exists beyond that dusty paper, is likely outdated or easily challenged. My lawyers can handle it. Harper felt a surge of anger but channeled it into calm resolve. It exists, Mr. Thorne, and it's legally binding. Furthermore, she reached for another document, we found this in my grandmother's papers. She held up a copy of a cease and desist letter, crumpled but legible, dated from 5 years prior. A letter sent from Harper Lane to your firm, Mr. Thorne, regarding unauthorized surveying and soil sampling on the inn's property without her permission. It details her concerns about encroachment and potential environmental impact, citing specific state regulations regarding coastal preservation. Alex added, we also found correspondence indicating your firm made several unsolicited, aggressive purchase offers to Mrs. Lane over the years, even after she repeatedly declined. Your tactics, including the recent 48-hour ultimatum and veiled threats about code violations, demonstrate a pattern of attempting to pressure and intimidate property owners. We believe you were aware of the potential environmental protections on this land and chose to ignore them. A murmur went through the crowd. People exchanged uneasy glances. Thorne's polished facade began to crack. His smile vanished, replaced by a glare. This is slander, his lawyer interjected. This is documented fact, Harper replied, her voice clear and strong. My grandmother fought you years ago, Mr. Thorne, and we are here to continue that fight. Ms. Albright addressed the room. Does anyone else wish to speak on the matter? Mrs. Gable stood immediately, her kind face set with determination. I worked for Alara for 20 years, she said, her voice carrying through the room. That inn wasn't just a building. It was part of Alara and part of this town's heart. She poured her life into it and into that garden. She loved those little plants more than anything, and she loved Port Blossom. Sterling Thorne doesn't care about Port Blossom. He cares about profit. We need to protect what Alara protected. Other townspeople spoke up, echoing Mrs. Gable's sentiments, sharing memories of Alara and the inn, expressing concern about the environmental impact and Thorne's heavy-handed approach. Eleanor Lane remained seated, but as Harper spoke, Harper caught her mother's eye. For the first time, Eleanor offered a small, proud smile, a silent acknowledgement of her daughter's strength and conviction. Her connection to this place and her grandmother finally understood. Thorne, visibly rattled, leaned into the microphone again. These emotional appeals and speculative evidence don't change the fact that this property is in disrepair and needs significant investment. My offer stands, a generous one. Your offer represents destruction, Alex countered calmly. Our plan represents preservation and a future for the inn that honors its past and its environment. Ms. Albright conferred briefly with the other committee members. The tension in the room was palpable, everyone leaning forward, waiting. Finally, Ms. Albright turned back to face the room. The committee has reviewed the proposals and the evidence presented. While we acknowledge the need for property maintenance, the documentation regarding the Coastal Preservation Overlay District, C4, is compelling and appears valid. Furthermore, the ecological surveys presented by Ms. Lane and Mr. Rivera provide substantial evidence that the property at 17 Harbor Road falls within the criteria for this protected status. The committee is also concerned by the documented history of aggressive acquisition attempts by Sterling Thorne and Associates. She fixed her gaze on Thorne. Given the legal implications of the C4 overlay and the demonstrated ecological value of the land, this committee cannot recommend approving a development proposal that would clearly violate these protections and irreversibly damage a unique local ecosystem. Therefore, Mr. Thorne, your proposal for redevelopment is denied. A wave of relief and muted cheers swept through the townspeople. Thorne's face was a mask of fury, his lawyer whispering urgently beside him. He shoved his chair back, rising abruptly. "This isn't over," he snarled, glaring at Harper and Alex, then at the committee. "I'll see you in court." But his bluster lacked conviction. The fight had gone out of his eyes. His plan had unraveled under the weight of evidence and community support. He stormed out, his lawyer scrambling to follow. Harper and Alex looked at each other, a shared sense of exhaustion and triumph washing over them. They had done it. The inn was safe. For now. Harper turned back to the room, a genuine smile finally breaking through her tension. She saw Mrs. Gable clapping, tears in her eyes. She saw her mother, still smiling, nodding almost imperceptibly. She saw the faces of people she'd grown up with, people who had seemed indifferent or critical, now looking at her with respect and gratitude. The cheers of the townsfolk faded, leaving behind the quiet hum of relief and the vast, silent question of asterisk, now asterisk. The fight for the Salty Air Inn had been won, a high-tide decision made that pulled Alara's legacy back from the brink. Standing together on the town hall steps, their hands finding each other, the victory was sweet and sharp, like salt spray, but beneath it lay the undeniable reality of the work ahead. The inn was safe, yes, but still a crumbling shell, whispering of decades of neglect and demanding an immense undertaking. Their hands found each other, a silent promise forged in shared struggle and growing love. The immediate storm had passed, leaving clear skies above, but the true journey was just beginning. It wasn't just about restoring timbers and tides. It was about charting a future together, weaving their individual dreams and ambitions into a shared life rooted in Port Blossom, and reimagining the inn as a symbol of what they had built. As they looked out towards the harbor, the path ahead stretched out before them, daunting yet filled with possibility. The last echoes of applause and congratulatory calls from the town hall faded as they stepped back into the quiet embrace of the Salty Air Inn. The fight was won, the immediate threat averted, but the vast, silent question of asterisk now still hung in the air, heavy with the reality of decayed timbers and salt-worn walls. Standing together on the sagging porch, a place that felt both broken and brimming with potential, Harper turned to Alex, their hands finding each other again, not in battle formation, but in shared relief and the quiet understanding that the true work, the work of rebuilding a legacy and a future, was just beginning. Beneath the daunting scale of the task ahead, new shoots of hope were already pushing through the soil of their shared victory, hinting at clear horizons. They didn't speak for a long moment, just held hands, looking out at the harbor where the late afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows. The air was calm, finally free of the oppressive tension that had coiled around them for weeks. A shared sigh escaped them simultaneously, a soft sound swallowed by the vast quiet of the old house. Harper leaned her head against Alex's shoulder. "We did it," she murmured, the words feeling both inadequate and profound. He squeezed her hand. "We did." "You did, Harper, that presentation. Alara would have been so proud. I know I am." She tilted her head back to look at him, a smile spreading across her face, warm and genuine. "We did it together. I couldn't have found the C4 zoning without your help, and you couldn't have verified the habitat without my botany skills. And Alara's journals were the real hero." "The unsung hero, perhaps," Alex agreed, his eyes soft as he looked at her. "Just like you were for so long. Always working quietly, noticing the things others missed." The easy comfort between them was a stark contrast to the sharp edges of their past rivalry. It felt like shedding a skin, revealing something tender and true underneath. Harper traced the lines on his palm with her thumb. "Remember standing right here, the day the lawyer told us? I thought my life was over. I thought it was a cruel joke. I thought I was being sentenced to summer school in a haunted house with my least favorite person," Alex admitted with a chuckle, the sound rich and warm. "Turns out Alara knew exactly what she was doing, throwing us into the deep end together. She didn't just want to save the inn," Harper mused, her gaze drifting over the peeling paint and cracked windows. "She wanted to save us too. From ourselves, from whatever was holding us back." Alex gently cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. "She definitely succeeded with me. You broke through every wall I didn't even know I'd built." "Same here," Harper confessed, leaning into his touch. "I thought I needed to be somewhere else, someone else to be happy, but it turns out I just needed to be here with you, fighting for something that matters." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. Their breath mingled in the quiet air. "So this is real?" Harper's heart swelled. "More real than anything I've ever felt." "Good," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Because I'm all in, Harper. Whatever this is, whatever happens next, I'm with you." She smiled, a happy tear escaping the corner of her eye. "I'm with you too, Alex." His kiss was a promise, a culmination, and a beginning. It was slow, deep, and filled with the quiet certainty of a future they were choosing together on this slightly too salty, utterly perfect porch. Relief washed over them, profound and grounding. The uncertainty of the external threat was gone, replaced by the vast, exciting uncertainty of building something new from the ground up together. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the dusty dining room of the Salty Air Inn, illuminating motes dancing in the air above a large, salvaged table. Spread across its surface were blueprints, old maps of Port Blossom, Alara's botanical journals, Alex's field notebooks, and numerous sketches on loose sheets of paper. Harper and Alex sat side by side, a comfortable silence punctuated by the scratching of pencils and the rustle of paper, a different kind of partnership taking root. "Okay," Harper said, tapping a pencil against a worn map. "The structural assessment is the absolute priority. We need engineers, obviously. But while they're doing that, we can start envisioning the asterisk purpose asterisk." Alex pointed to a section of Alara's journal detailing coastal plant life near the inn's seawall. Alara clearly saw this place as more than just an inn. She was documenting everything, like it was its own little biosphere. "Exactly," Harper said, her eyes bright with excitement. "And with the C4 overlay, that's not just history, it's a mandate. What if the Salty Air Inn isn't just a place for people to stay? What if it's also a place to learn asterisk?" Ideas flowed freely, bouncing between them. A historical in celebrating Port Blossom's past, yes, but integrated with something new. "We could have guest rooms that are themed, like the botanist's study or the marine lab," Alex suggested, sketching a small beaker next to a proposed room layout. "And a library dedicated to local ecology, using Alara's journals as the foundation." "And the garden," Harper exclaimed, already mentally redesigning the overgrown grounds. We can restore it using native coastal species, a living botanical collection. Offer workshops on propagation, coastal gardening, maybe even field trips to study local flora. And I could run marine biology workshops, Alex added, his enthusiasm mirroring hers. Tidal pool exploration, discussions on estuary health, maybe even partner with the local school for educational programs. The inn could be a hub for environmental research and education. The potential felt limitless. Combining their passions, honoring Alara's hidden work, and creating something truly unique for Port Blossom. It was a far cry from Harper's initial plan of restoring it just enough to sell. This was about building something lasting, something meaningful. It fits the C4 overlay perfectly, Harper realized. Using the property to highlight and study its ecological significance, it gives us a mission beyond just fixing a leaky roof. They started outlining phases. Phase 1, structural repair and essential renovations. Phase 2, developing the ecological educational components. Phase 3, restoring guest rooms and opening to the public, perhaps starting small. A gentle tap at the door announced Mrs. Gable, her arms laden with a basket. "Good morning, dears," she said, setting down the basket filled with fresh pastries and thermoses. "Heard the good news. Everyone in town's buzzing. Thought you might need sustenance after all that excitement." "Mrs. Gable, thank you," Harper said, genuinely touched. "Come look at what we're thinking." They eagerly shared their nascent plans, their voices filled with a palpable sense of purpose. Mrs. Gable listened, nodding, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Oh, Alara would have just loved this," she said softly, placing a hand on one of the botanical journals. "She always saw the potential in this place, and in you too, turning it into a place of learning. It's beautiful, exactly the kind of life she wanted for the inn." She picked up a pastry. "Just remember, fixing up an old place is hard work, but seeing it come back to life, there's nothing quite like it." She smiled warmly. Port Blossom needs places like this. Places that remember the past but look to the future. Mrs. Gable's quiet encouragement bolstered their resolve. As she left, promising to spread the word about needing local contractors, Harper and Alex returned to their plans, the aroma of pastries mingling with the faint scent of salt and old paper. The task ahead was immense, but no longer overwhelming. It was a canvas, waiting for them to bring it to life. Later that week, Harper found herself sitting across from her mother, Eleanor, at a small table in the Tides and Times Cafe. The air buzzed with quiet morning chatter and the clatter of ceramic cups. Harper had called her mother, wanting to talk without the weight of the inn or the estate hanging over them. Eleanor looked softer, less guarded than Harper had seen her in years. Maybe the resolution of the thorn situation had lifted a weight from her too. "Thank you for coming, Mom," Harper said, stirring her coffee. "Of course, Harper," Eleanor replied, offering a small smile. "I wanted to. I was so proud of you at the town hall. You and Alex, standing up there, fighting for Alara's legacy like that." Harper's breath hitched. Hearing her mother say that expressed pride not in some abstract career achievement, but in what she was doing here in Port Blossom for the inn for Alara, it meant everything. "Thank you, Mom," Harper said, her voice thick with emotion. That means a lot." Eleanor reached across the table, covering Harper's hand with her own. It was a rare gesture of physical affection from her mother, and Harper squeezed her hand in return. "I know I haven't always understood your path," Eleanor admitted, her gaze steady. "I wanted you to have security, something traditional. I worried about your ambition taking you too far away." "It did, for a while," Harper conceded. "I thought I had to leave Port Blossom behind to be successful, to be *me*, but I was wrong." She looked around the cozy cafe, at the familiar faces, felt the grounding presence of the town she'd once fled. "I've found something here, Mom, something real, not just the inn, but a purpose, and Alex." She smiled, a genuine, open smile that reached her eyes. "He's amazing, Mom. We're planning the inn together, turning it into something Alara would have loved. A place for ecology, for history, for the community." Eleanor listened intently, her expression shifting from cautious to genuinely pleased. "An ecological center? That's wonderful, Harper. It fits Alara's interests perfectly. And yours, you always had such a way with plants, even when you were small." "You saw that?" Harper asked, surprised. "Of course I saw it," Eleanor said gently. I didn't know how it fit into the future I imagined for you. I realize now. I was trying to fit you into my asterisk picture instead of letting you paint your own. She paused, her voice softening further. Seeing you happy here, Harper, truly happy and purposeful, it's all I ever wanted, even if it's not the life I expected. A warmth spread through Harper's chest, dissolving years of unspoken tension and misunderstanding. Thank you, Mom, she repeated, tears blurring her vision slightly. For understanding. For seeing me? Always, my dear, Eleanor said, her grip tightening slightly on Harper's hand. Welcome home, Harper. The words, spoken without reservation or expectation, landed with a profound sense of rightness. Harper felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She was home, not just in the physical sense, but in her own skin, reconciled with her past and looking forward to her future. Weeks later, the air around the salty air inn hummed with cautious activity. A scaffolding cage wrapped around one side of the building, contractors' trucks were parked in the driveway, and the sound of hammering and sawing replaced the mournful creaks of decay. Inside, rooms had been cleared, dust sheets covered salvageable furniture, and preliminary structural work was underway. It was a long, daunting process, but it was progress. Harper and Alex stood on Driftwood Beach, watching the tide roll in, the sun setting the sky ablaze in hues of orange and purple. This had become their ritual, a quiet space to decompress after a day of planning, meetings, and the inevitable setbacks that came with restoring an old building. Engineer thinks the main support beams on the east wing are solid, Alex reported, skipping a flat stone across the water. More rotten than we thought in the kitchen subfloor, but manageable. Good, Harper replied, sifting sand through her fingers. And I met with a landscape architect today. She's excited about the native garden concept. Thinks we can incorporate some of the existing historic specimens Alara had too. They talked about their vision for the inn, the small, intimate guest rooms, the public library study space, the lab area, the garden, the plan to open in stages. It was a future they were building, brick by brick, tide pool by tide pool. But the conversation wasn't just about the inn. It was about them. So, Alex said, turning to face her, his silhouette outlined against the fiery sky. What about your botany career, Harper? Are you really okay settling here, giving up the big research labs, the fieldwork elsewhere? Harper smiled, looping her arm through his. Port Blossom isn't settling, Alex, it's rooting. There's incredible ecological diversity right here on the coast, and I can still do research, perhaps consult. The inn can even become a base for my work, and maybe even yours. We can find a way to balance it. My marine biology work is pretty tied to the coast anyway, he mused, pulling her closer. And working with you, building this, it feels more meaningful than anything I've done before. It does, doesn't it? Harper agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. They stood there for a long time, the sound of the waves a soothing rhythm. The salty air inn was visible in the distance, a shape on the horizon, no longer a symbol of dread and decay, but of hope and potential. Scaffolding clung to its sides like determined vines, a promise of new life. It wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. There would be more challenges, more dust, more difficult decisions. But the core conflicts were resolved. The past had been understood and reconciled. The future was being built on shared purpose and undeniable love. Harper squeezed Alex's hand. The salty air filled her lungs, no longer smelling stagnant, but alive with possibility. The horizon stretching before them was clear, open, and theirs to navigate together. They were Harper Lane, botanist, and Alex Rivera, marine biologist, standing side by side, ready to build their future in the place that had once felt like a trap, but had ultimately become their home.